I have heard those ideas that we should have a ban on the Quran because the Quran would be a very dangerous book, which is a very, very strange argument to make. And for many different reasons. The first reason is that there is nothing special in terms of defining a religion that you would not find in the Bible, for example, if you read the Bible. In other words, when people start reading, pretending that they are reading the Quran and picking up a verse here, a verse there, what they are doing is just intellectual crookery. They are being a crook, because for any kind of text you can do that kind of game and pretend that you are responding to a text as it is. There is this argument that actually the Quran is a closed book in terms of being the word of God and the final word of God and leaving no room for any kind of reflection. Well, Islam was not born yesterday, was not born on 9/11/2001. It is a very long intellectual and spiritual tradition. So when you know the long and spiritual tradition of Islam, it is the best answer to that kind of theological arguments against the Quran. When you come to know, simply it is a simple fact, the multiplicity of interpretations, the readings of the Quran, and the way in which Muslims themselves have theorized the multiplicity of interpretation and the multiplicity of readings of their own text, you can see what it means for a text to be a living word. It is the word of God, but it is the living word of God according to Muslims. There is a tradition, for example, that says that every Muslim should be reading the Quran as if it had been revealed to them at the very moment when they read it, which is actually this call for an interpretation and an interpretative reading of the Quran that keeps it as an open word. But you have to be familiar, or at least curious, about what the Muslims are saying about themselves and what their relationship to their own text is in order to say that. And there is something very curious in the arguments made by these politicians from the Netherlands. Because if you say, according to him, if you say, well, no, that what you are saying is not true, the word is totally open to reading and interpretation, and the whole spiritual and intellectual tradition of Islam is here to be an argument in that direction, he would say, yes, but if you say that, you are not truly a Muslim. I mean, what kind of demonstration is that? If you disagree, it means that you are being, betraying your own religion. So you can understand that actually the bottom line is that he doesn't know what he's talking about. And second, these are just political arguments to win elections. Exactly, because if you take a religion, all religions have constitutive texts, and then you have all the tradition that goes with it, the reading that goes with it, the culture that has developed around it, in particular the culture of interpretation, the philosophy that was born out of it, was generated by it, the controversies, the discussions, the differences. For example, there is a well-known tradition in Islam which says that differences and divergences between scholars are a blessing. You know, this kind of praise for difference and difference of interpretation as being not a curse, not being a problem, not being a threat, but being a blessing actually, is a well-known Islamic tradition. So one has to know better the religion if one has to make statements that have the pretense of being theological or informed statements. I would say that there is an Islam which is highly publicized, which is very much present in the press, which would be that self-enclosed understanding and exclusive understanding of it. But the Islam of pluralism, the Islam of openness, is still also modern Islam. In other words, one should not be confusing the sound and the fury that goes with a certain presence of Islam in our press, in our news, and in our consciousness with the totality of the Islamic world. You do have continuation in the Islamic world today of that tradition that I mentioned, that philosophical tradition, or the tradition of openness, which is part of Islamic life and Islamic way of thinking in many, many parts of the world. So flattening our understanding of what Islam is on the statements made by particular sects and groups which have this kind of exclusive mentality is also something that we probably should be questioning. Usually when I see the caricature of Islam that is being produced on our screens and in our news, both from the people who say that they are Muslim, excluding everybody else from the status of Muslim actually, and caricaturing their own religion, or on the other hand, all the populism and Islamophobias that have developed nowadays, where people pretend to have all kind of knowledge of Islam and also caricature the religion. Of course, you do not recognize it, and you understand that you have the responsibility of speaking on its behalf, on speaking on the behalf of the rich intellectual and spiritual tradition that Islam is. Because the only way of responding to that kind of discourse and caricature is by reestablishing the historical fact of what the intellectual and spiritual tradition of Islam is, and trying to educate both Muslims and non-Muslims to the knowledge of that religion.